and welcome to Fountainhead, brought to you by WebEngage. Fountainhead is a consolidation of all of our education, ecosystem, and community efforts. As the first initiative under this umbrella, the Fountainhead Leadership Series aims to bring to you the best of industry leaders to share actionable insights, tricks of the trade, and to answer all of your nuanced questions. So ready to get inspired and entertained? Let's go.
Hi, good morning, world. So, yet another edition of the Fountainhead Leadership Series. And among the series of very interesting people that we've been talking to, we have Sachin here with us today. Among the many things Sachin has done, I think the most notable would be the amount of money he's burnt, I think, given the conversation's context today. But then, more importantly, he's been a very prolific marketer. He's a great storyteller. He's done serious amount of work in performance marketing. He's also an angel investor, in case you're thinking about that. So I think the most notable ones there might be Chingari and some of those ventures which have now become very interesting. So yeah, basking in all of that action, Sachin decided to become a startup entrepreneur himself, and now he runs a company called FanVideo. And the interesting part about that is it's all about videos, which are the holy grail of marketing now, and how it leads to performance and outcomes is something we'll delve deep into. Sachin, thank you so much for doing this. Welcome on board.
Hey, thanks a lot, Ankur, for inviting me. I think this is probably my second engagement with WebEngage. The first one was with engagement few years back, and good to see you, man. I think we've met a few times in past, and great conversations talking about the work that you were doing and excellent learnings. I think I know you from what, like Life in Lines,
Life in Lines,
the
yes,
Indian
back then.
Twitter
It
account.
goes that far. But we're live and we have people listening, so I don't want to go down the memory lane on that one. We
Yeah.
definitely do that next time we meet you. But well, so here we are. Why don't you just quickly tell us about Fan Video? What are you doing here?
Sure. At FanVideo, we are trying to help enterprises create customer-driven content, which is very authentic, and it drives at least 3x higher engagement rates. All this comes from my past experience where, I created customer-driven content, and when I used that content for performance marketing, we saw like massive uplift on click-through rates, sign-up rates, and conversion rates. So I'm just trying to pass my learnings through a product for everybody to use.
Sounds awesome. So here, well, I think performance marketing has become central to a lot of growth journeys for a lot of startups. The amount of money that's coming in gets deployed. I think a substantial chunk of it goes into growing fast. And the simplest and easiest way people might imagine would be to spend where you can actually just predict that, okay, I'm going to spend X amount of money, get Y number of clicks. Some of them could become an order, and I'll get there. So, there's a bunch of jargons that are involved here. And if you could just help break those down for us. And, I understand this is a 0 to 1 question probably, but I think the smarter person you are, then you can dumb it down for us effectively. So, what would be the key jargon points in this performance marketing ecosystem?
So I think the very definition of performance marketing has performance inbuilt in it, which basically means revenue impact. So when you think about performance marketing, it is not about running Facebook ads or Google ads or affiliate campaigns, right? It is about understanding the consumer problem and then their aspirations, and then converting those problems and aspirations into consumer journeys and product journeys, right? So what that would mean is like, how do you drive engagement with your creatives, your landing pages, your product pages, and final, actual customer experience that comes out of it, right? These are full length journeys that I'm talking about. For example, from the standpoint of understanding user segmentation, market research, insights, then communication planning, creative design, media planning, acquisition, conversion rate optimization, retention, ARPU expansion, and customer advocacy. Now, I know that there are so many words that I used, right? But uh, in simple words, right? Like it is just about thinking about consumer problems and thinking about how to take people through a journey where we solve their problem in a very, very simple way, right? um, a lot of this is also connected to metrics, right? It is connected to measuring things and data and things like that, right? So when any brand sort of or any startup is looking at certain vanity metrics in isolation, it sort of becomes misleading, right? Like you are not then focused on what you want to achieve, right? So there is merit in all kinds of metrics. For example, if you're running a top of the funnel campaign, like a branding campaign, there are metrics where you want to look at reach and frequency. You also want to look at shareability, meaning the content that you are publishing, right? Are people sharing that content? If let's say that you resonate with the problem that you're trying to solve, and those people actually share that content, right? So that basically means that the problem that you're trying to solve is a genuine one, and people see merit in sharing it, and hence those kind of metrics matter at the kind of objective that you have set for that campaign. But when you do that, right, the algorithms automatically understand that the content being deployed is actually helpful for the community, and then these algorithms sort of push that content further to many more people, right? And that is where your cost per reach kind of campaigns start performing better, because one, you are expanding your reach, and two, you are able to get to higher number of people, right? Then when you look at middle of the funnel, right, there are the objective is intent building, right? The intent building will happen where you look at not just like add engagement metrics like or share or comment and so on and so forth, but also metrics which are related to your landing pages, right? Like where you're looking at page time spent on page, click to visit rates, engagement rate with the page, meaning you are interacting with several elements, and then in e-commerce, for example, it would be add to cart, or it would be for a product sign up, things like that, right? So those metrics become more important when you're running like middle of the funnel campaigns, right? And when you look at the bottom of the funnel campaigns, right, where the objective is to drive transaction, there you look at actual product funnels, right, where you are looking at, okay, people landed on my cart page, checkout page, or people landing after people signed up, are they actually using my product? So is there a aha moment that I'm able to give to them where they are able to see the actual outcomes for them, and how quickly can we drive that, right? So there you would look at your conversion rates, your average transaction values, return on ad spends, and then you slice and dice it up with several demographic factors and things like that, right? Like so, in summary, I would say that there are various objectives that the campaigns can have, and you have to identify the right metrics for those kind of campaigns. Some of
Hmm.
the you know cases that I've seen is, and I've done that myself, that I set up campaigns on various channels, and all the campaigns were with the same objective of conversion. And funnily, if you think about it, right, like both things work, right? Meaning you can set up a campaign with a conversion objective, it will drive certain people to act, right? But not everybody is at the same level of awareness, not everybody is going to be same level of need for the product that you have, which basically means that you'll have to sort of funnel them into the conversion cycle. uh, I hope that gives you some perspective
Yes,
around
that's
this.
very interesting because we would normally imagine an orchestrated journey post the first transaction because that's something we do at WebEngage and very familiar with it. But the moment you talk about the journey and you describe this in the fashion of a funnel that people are at the awareness stage, consideration stage, and then conversion stage, I was trying to understand from a marketing mix standpoint and in a 0 to 1 journey where most people would be starting out with their plays, it's quite normal for somebody to get distracted with saying that I want everything to convert, which is not probably a bad idea given that you have some X amount of money to spend and you want to capture bottom of the funnel demand before you start expanding from there. So, what would your input be on the marketing mix at a 0 to 1 journey stage, where you're designing your first investments, you have some amount of money raised. Let's say you're able to afford 5 to 10 lakh rupee a month kind of investment in marketing. What would your marketing mix look like?
Sure. So, I would break it up into two parts. One, there are startups who are not funded, and then there are startups who are funded, right? Um, the startups that are not funded, I think the first thing for them is probably to be able to articulate the problem very, very accurately. That, this is the problem, right? This is the pain point which I'm trying to solve for, and this is the expected outcome for my, ideal customer profile or ICP, right? And then, sort of, instead of thinking about spending on marketing or this and that, like, that is the stage. Just pick up the phone, talk to the customer, or get onto a video call or whatever call, and directly talk to the customer and gather the most important insights about what are the current processes that they are following, where are the gaps, or how those processes can be improved, or what can be done, right? Like, so the initial stage, I would say, is just one-on-one interactions, and that works the best from a standpoint of learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of a startup which is willing to spend, let's say, 5 lakhs a month, right? um, I would say that there are different channels which will have different kind of impacts. For example, when you look at, let's say, SEO, right? While you'll see that SEO ROAS is like probably the highest, but it would take you several months to start ranking on several important keywords that are important, right? Now, on the other hand, if you've identified the correct ICP for you, depending on the kind of business that you are into, whether you are in B2B or B2C or B2B2C, so on and so forth, you'll have to experiment with each channel. There is no set path which says that, okay, do ABC, it will work forever, so on and so forth, right? You have to set up experiments, across channels. Look at the conversion cycles, look at the conversion ROAS at that point of time, and see, which channel is getting your business closer to your ICP, or your customer, and able to convert the faster, right? So I'm not saying that there are other ICPs that will convert, they'll convert at a later stage, but today, when you want to convert right now, how do you convert them right now? And to convert them right now, you need to be able to say that, okay, this ICP converts the fastest, right? So you invest your marketing dollars on those sort of ICPs the first. Two, let's figure out, where do I find these ICPs? Sometimes you'll realize that instead of a paid marketing channel, maybe these ICPs would take faster actions if you were going through a community route, or if you were going through a network route, right? Where it is like um, sort of referral kind of a system that you can build in. For example, let's say that you're trying to build an influencer network, right? And you say that, listen, I want to engage, I want to acquire influencers, or I want to acquire multiple customers of a certain brand, right? So on and so forth, right? At that point of time, you put a small incentive structure over there and get your referral scheme going, because referral will work only when someone has had a good experience with your product. So if someone has had a good experience with your product, they are any which ways going to share that information with people in their network. However, it is not a priority for them to share that experience with others. But if you do prompt them, then they are more likely to act upon it and share it with others, right? And hence, referrals work brilliantly right in the start. When you start thinking about paid acquisition channels, right? um, I think the simple logic is this, right? If let's It's a simple sales qualification process, right? One of the biggest thing in sales is qualifying your customer constantly, Do they have a problem? Do they need a solution? Do they need a solution now? Do they, how burning a problem is it for them, for which they are looking for a solution? How much they are willing to pay for that solution, right? The more you try to qualify these, higher the chances you will convert faster. Now, if you apply this logic to advertising channels, Google search comes right on top, where person is voluntarily going and searching in Google various kinds of keywords. So segment your keywords based on, this guy is right now at the research stage, at the intent building stage, and finally at the conversion stage, right? There'll always be, few people even at the intent and conversion stage who would want to try your product out, right? So be present there, because they know that, because that they have a need, and that need was strong enough for them to go and search, right? So I would say start there. That is point one. The second is
So, I'm
the
going to double click on this a little bit before you go further. So, when you say Google is the source of intent and you have high, mid, low, maybe three levels of intent that you can break into, the first point you would want to go after is the high intent folks because they're probably searching for a price information or they're searching for a very specific brand keyword. Initially, as a small company, you will not have a lot of brand search, but you'll have relevant keywords that would be probably falling within your thing. So if I were to say that across all the different channels available, inbound high intent search keywords is the first place to go after. And as a
yes.
founder of a company, because I'm a young team and I don't necessarily have all the amazing developed resources, is this something you recommend I do it myself? That I might as well just go to a Google panel and then figure out what the keyword search volumes are and what are the keywords that indicate the highest intent. And is that when you said that when I speak to a few people on the phone, I understand their burning pain points and what are they likely to search more? So then I zoom into the ICP from their search behavior. I don't have any other data points about this guy, right? I mean, all I have is a search query.
Sure. See, it depends, right? Depends on the kind of startup that you are in, depends on
Let's
your
focus
past
on a
background.
consumer business. You can look at e-commerce and maybe a bit of edtech as a possible play in terms of the kind of applications. But that's the focus of the conversation.
Right, right. So I think the way to think about this is this, right? That if you do come from a background of marketing, let's say, right, you will be able to do some bit of Google search, campaign planning on your own. um, but let's say if you don't come from that background, right,
Yeah.
then it is always advisable to sort of engage an expert. Now, when you do engage an expert, it is basically, thinking about whether you engage an expert who is hands on, in the sense that do you need strategic advice or do you need execution help, right? I would say that there are both these things are important, meaning getting the right strategic advice at the right time, and then getting the right sort of expert or partner involved for execution. Like I said, if you come with experience on running such campaigns in past, then sure, like, get your hands dirty and learn and so on and so forth, right? But if you feel that your time is going to be more focused on the other sides of the business, then, engage an agency with a small
It's going to be a
experimental budget.
question. It was going to be a down the road question, but since you now bring it up, this whole agency question, let's just
Sure.
zoom into this whole equation. I'm somebody who's not really done a lot of marketing before as a founder. I have money in the bank now because I have proven something of value to the investors I've spoken to, and now I need to scale rapidly. So here I am. Either I have to hire a full time team, and again, like you said, the strategy side is probably different from the execution side. It's not easy for me to judge if this agency is going to deliver the value I'm expecting to deliver. So, in a simplistic fashion, how do I judge one whether I choose an agency or do this in house? Because the scale of investments could be different. And
Yeah.
second, the criteria or the mechanism to judge these people as to ये टीम बनानी है बाहर करना है और बना कैसे करें इंटरव्यू कैसे लो इसका.
Sure. um all right, so I think, uh, like I said, depending on the stage of the business that you are in and your past expertise, but like coming to the point where you're saying that, listen, I already have some funding in the bank. investors are seeing value. Now I want to scale the business, right? What I've seen is that at an end, if you want to, like, think about your own business scale or your own monthly spends, it would not be wise to immediately spend a large amount of money, right? It won't be wise for any entrepreneur to do that, right? Unless there is a very clear investor led push where they're saying that own the category. I don't care how much money you are spending, and this is competitive and this that whatever jing bang, right? Um, so my sense is that if that is not the case, then I would go in a very structured, calculated way to be able to run several experiments one after the other or in parallel, to be able to understand what works and what doesn't work. Uh, now, when you think about hiring people in house, right, and an agency, my sense is that there are a lot of people in the market who are maybe in house, but because majority of their experience has been in house, they may not know the very specific tuning parameters of a certain platform. For example, you pick a platform like Google Programmatic, or you pick a platform like Facebook Ads. I mean, in the past 15 years, I've seen Facebook change their interface probably like a million times, right? Like when I started, the kind of interface that existed versus what exists today, it is just impossible for someone to be acquainted to that changing speed, unless you are running those campaigns on a day on day basis, right?
Hmm.
So what I see is that people who are running their agencies, right, because they have built their internal frameworks in such a way that there are people who are on execution sides on the platforms, they constantly keep coming and learning and keeping themselves updated, right?
Okay.
Now because of that, their ability to understand a sort of like a platform is much better, and
The
hence
tuning
it,
parameters would be more in control. Their ability
yes,
to
yes,
optimize and tune up might just be better. Okay.
yeah, they'll be much better to take action around that. Now when you think about in-house team, right, in-house team, it's a challenging sort of situation. I've been, like, I used to run almost like a 25 or 50 member in-house team, right? Like, and I mean, I've gone through those stages, right? And so um, I can tell you that there are three different axes to look at. Okay.
Hmm.
um, first is like straightforward ROI axis, right? That what is the ROI of running the campaign in house versus running the campaign with an agency, right? The second axis is the
Are you talking
capability.
about the pure people cost here, or when you say ROI, you mean the people cost of it
Yeah,
versus agency
so
fees?
yeah, so for example, if you're spending like a crore a month, and you're paying like 10% to an agency or 5% to an agency, right? um, can you get that kind of a talent which can manage all this in
Hmm.
house, right?
Okay.
And if your commissions are higher than the hiring cost in house, then sure, hire in house, right? But if
Okay.
your commissions are lower than the hiring cost, then it makes sense to continue with an agency, right?
So you're saying it's
um,
a pure economic decision in terms of cost of people versus percentage
Absolutely.
commission. Okay.
So that is the first axis, right? First axis to think about, that from
So
a
this is nothing to do
economic
with
ROI.
somewhere trying to build a capability in-house, because a lot of people have that dilemma. This is too critical for my business. I need to build this capability, and
Yeah.
that might compromise the kind of outcomes they get, because, like you said, you don't necessarily get people who understand everything as deeply. So
Yes.
the agency might end up, in fact, having a slightly superior mix of people, because then they don't full
Yes.
time on your account or your campaign anyway.
Yes.
They'll probably be exposed more. Okay, so that's an
Yes.
economic decision on level one, and agency expertise would be handy. But now tell me something within this whole agency ecosystem, the framework you stated about being experimental about it and trying to learn this consistently. Is this something which is a fair assumption of table stakes, that any agency I talk to will at least take this approach in a sincere fashion, that we have to run these 20 experiments or whatever in parallel sequence, and then derive logically understandable outcomes, because that's where the black box has to get demystified. A lot of times when agency conversations happen, the founder probably knows some but does not know enough, and he doesn't necessarily know how to ask the right questions and how to assess if these guys are taking me for a ride somewhere, or are they actually genuinely giving me stuff which is real. So how do you demystify this?
Sure. So I think um, there are two ways to learn, right? One is that you burn your fingers and you learn, right? And
Or
to
you
be
listen to
honest,
Sachin?
and 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 I'll say this, right? There is nothing compared to burning your own fingers, right? And
Yeah,
I'll
but
tell
it's
you what.
expensive. It consumes time and money.
Listen. I get what you're saying, right? I get what you're saying. I've worked with few founders in past, right? In as recently as this year, last month or few months back, right?
Hmm.
Um, I think in India, at least, people don't value the process of sort of valuing expertise. Um, what I mean by that is this, right? Uh, like people want to sort of, like in their heads, right? Like people sort of feel that, oh, this is marketing, what's the big deal? Like, it's running like a TV campaign, or it's running like a Facebook campaign. What's the big deal? At the end of it, the ad is going to show up and people will click, right? Like, so I think the problem is that people don't understand the nuances, because of which they don't value the expertise time, right?
Really,
and
that's pretty
and they
surprising to
want,
me because I'm overwhelmed by a whole bunch of this stuff. So I'm surprised you say that most people don't respect the expertise. But sure,
yeah,
you've
I
interacted with
mean,
founders, so let's understand that.
so I mean, without taking any names or any industry specifics, right? Like, so worked with a founder, right? Like, who had burnt their fingers running a TV campaign,
Hmm.
consciously acknowledged that I burnt my fingers running a TV campaign. I was working with them in a consulting position, and they still chose to go ahead and run another TV campaign without consulting.
Sure, that's where
And the
the
reason,
throwing many darts and you have the money. So that's the challenge, right? I mean, if you look at the original thesis of this conversation, 80% or 75% startups will end up burning themselves to the ground by burning money, right? And
absolutely.
where does the money get burnt? It's predominantly spent in growth efforts. कि यार performance पे खर्च करते हैं, TV पे खर्च करते हैं. Advertising is spent at the wrong places without the sufficient process and respect of the experimentation. Hence, I was coming to that. When somebody is at a 0 to 1 stage, or maybe even a 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 kind of stage, these are the dilemmas. Do I do this? Do I do that? Do I do this? Do I do that? So, from a designing the approach perspective, and there is going to be a degree of pressure to deploy and grow fast, right? So, you are under pressure. You don't want to make mistakes, but then you don't have the right answers of how to go about this. The agency guy comes in and tells you a very glorified picture. I don't know if it's real, it's not real. And that's the situation I'm trying to delve deeper into as to how do you navigate.
So, let's think about a funnel, Ankur.
Hmm.
Let's say that you think about the entire advertising ecosystem, where there are either ads on TV, print, radio, billboard, online media, like
Hmm.
digital video, whatever, right? Like, there are
Sure.
creators, right? And then there is some kind of a click through, meaning someone clicks or someone remembers and searches, right?
Sure.
Net outcome, people land on your platform, whether it is
Yeah.
your website or app, right? Now let's take a step back and think, right? If currently your funnel converts from visit to a sign up to a conversion, if your current funnel converts at, let's say, a visit to conversion rate of 10%, hypothetically, right?
Say.
Do you think that just by pushing more creatives in people's faces, the funnel will start converting better?
They'll probably drive more clicks, but not conversions. Or
So now what that tells you is this, right? There are two, three things to be done. One, you have to, so let's say that you say it can convert better because you changed the face of the creative, you added like a celebrity, or you added an influencer, or you added a real customer, right? Whatever, right? Yes, it can have an impact on a higher throughput, where people are more likely to act and your conversion might expand, right? But
So you're
then
saying conversion absolute number or conversion rate?
rate, conversion
Rate.
rate.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. Hmm.
But the net thing to think about here is this, right? That unless you methodically understand that what channel does what to your conversion rate, just by throwing more money at that channel is not going to start converting higher. So
Hmm.
if your ROAS on a campaign on a certain traffic source is, let's say, whatever, 2x, right? It is not going to become 4x just because you threw more traffic at it,
Sure.
right? Which
So that's
basically
where.
means,
Hmm.
yeah, which
Yeah. Go on.
fundamentally means that you will have to understand that how your conversion funnel is going to improve.
Absolutely. Which is what
Run
I was coming to.
experiment.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So when you work with an agency, the transparency of these learnings that these are the funnels that are running, and I'm still surprised. I've spoken to a large company's growth person engaged with a large agency, and she was blind to her funnels. She didn't know what her full funnel looked like.
yeah,
So I was like, okay, the agency says this is not possible to do. And she's a perfectly smart, fancy B school graduate from somewhere in the US. She's new to the subject. So gets
sure.
overwhelmed by the whole situation. And that kind of amazes, amuses, terrifies, all of it, right? Because
Yeah,
a full funnel visibility is something super basic to a marketer. And if you're not able
absolutely.
to establish that, how do you decide what to do, what not to do? And here you
Yeah,
are spending a meaningful amount of money, and a perfectly reputed agency tells you that this is not possible to see the full funnel. So
yeah,
where this is how do I deal with this as a marketer? I mean, how does a marketer deal with this?
sure.
But the expectation setting, demanding these things as basic, that's where I'm trying to zoom in.
Yeah. So I think there is a cultural problem here.
Mhm.
It's not about a marketer or an agency, right? The cultural problem here is sort of like a growth driven mindset versus let's run TV ads.
Okay.
The difference is this, right? Majority of our agencies in past, right, have been very lucky that they can just blast a campaign in the country, right, cross their fingers and say, hey, listen, see, I got you the best celebrity, here are TV ads, and here is massive sales, now look, all the shelves are filled with your products, right?
Hmm.
Nobody questioned them to understand where, what, how, like what led to what outcomes, right?
Hmm.
Now, in today's time, right, if you're going to continue with this approach, right, let's throw TV ads, right? First, the new generation is not consuming that much TV. I'm not
Sure.
saying that the TV efficacy has gone down or whatever, right? Like it has, but still, like, it has massive reach,
Probably
right?
does not have your ICP.
It may not have your ICP, right?
Yeah.
Now look at the digital funnels of it, right?
Hmm.
If people are saying that, listen, this can't be solved and this and that, culturally, if you are a founder who believes in running structured experiments, right, data driven experiments, you
But
are
isn't
more
that like
likely to succeed.
necessary? Whether you're there or not, you might as well learn it because it's probably how your life is going to be. I mean, that's what you need to do. Should that
See,
not be
I can,
table stakes to be experimental about this?
sorry.
For a founder, isn't it like table stakes to be experimental and data driven? You can't be
Yeah.
I'm going to run TV ads kind of approach anymore.
Yeah, no, so I'll tell you the problem, right? The problem
Hmm.
is that, because being data driven has become cool, so every founder uses the right terminology, right? Everybody will use the right terminology that we are data driven. Look how many metrics we are tracking, right? But the
Hmm.
problem is they're still very impatient, right? They're
Okay.
impatient with data. They think that, oh, you got like, 0.5% improvement in this one small experiment. That's not going to change the trajectory of the business. And
Sure.
that's where the problem is.
Hmm.
People are looking for people with magic wands, and these are the agencies, which will come showing the magic wand, and the consumer and the founder will say, oh wow, magic wand, and they'll buy into it, and then they'll burn their fingers, and then they'll say, sorry, I burnt my fingers, right?
So let's
I,
just say the
I
founder has the humility to acknowledge that he does not know this, and he realizes slash burns his fingers and then figures, yeah, whatever I did was a bad idea. Now zooming in, can we safely say that to be data driven and funnel approach on experiments is the default position for the founder? Because given the way the digital marketing ecosystem is evolving and the share of spend that's going in that direction, that's the only way to survive it. There is no
Yeah,
way you can afford to spend marketing money without being data driven.
yeah,
And experimental approach on understanding your funnels and then seeing that outcomes are pretty much yourself, because your agency can prepare those dashboards, but you have to kind of consume them and take at least a mature stance on understanding what's working, what's not working. And this is
yeah,
going to need time, which means you can't, let's say, run 2,000 experiments in parallel and overnight jump your spends. And but this is table stakes. There is no two ways about it. If an agency refuses to give you visibility of the funnel, that's probably a bad idea to work with them, because they're not going to hold responsibility on this. Fair
correct.
statement to take a conclusion on? Okay. One proper
Sure.
clear conclusion drawn. So that's very helpful, and which is why I'm, in for this conversation. यार ये नहीं है तो मत करो काम. It's as simple as that.
So you'll be surprised, Ankur. Like I've spoken to some of the founders, well funded, doing very well. This that.
Doing well is the temporary situation. 80% of
I
them are going to shut
actually
down. That's
told
the reality
them
of it.
in pretty much straightforward words, please stop doing performance marketing. You are not ready for it. And and
Yeah.
and this is funny if you think like from a standpoint of a performance marketer who is supposed to be driving transactions, telling you that don't do this.
Hmm.
And the reason is not because performance marketing doesn't work, right? Fundamentally the reason is culturally you are not in that mindset, and you will
You're better
not
off
be in
sponsoring
that
IPLs.
mindset. Sorry.
You're still happier off sponsoring an IPL or whatever.
Yeah, please go ahead, do that. Like, I'm telling you, there are investors sitting out there who are more than happy to see Instagram posts with likes and comments, and then, IPL fundings and sponsorships with logos on the t-shirts and boundaries and stuff like that. I am for it. I'm not against it. Please do it.
You've done
Right.
a bunch of it as well, right? But that's where the marketing mix comes in. Here,
So
how do
that's
you
what I'm
allocate
saying.
to these things? Hmm.
I'm saying that I am for it. And I'll tell you how we did that, right? Like,
Hmm.
it's not like one fine day I woke up and said, all right, let's sponsor IPL. No,
Sure.
no, no, no. We spent years of experimentation to understand how TV advertising works, how billboard advertising works, how other kind of advertising works, right? Like, and we internally ran hundreds of experiments. We built internal statistical models to understand that, what is the impact of running a TV ad on our revenue from
Hmm.
several standpoints, right? From a standpoint of direct traffic, from a standpoint of click through improvements, from a standpoint of conversion rate improvements, from a standpoint of traffic going up, category building, this, that, right? And we never did something like this. Let's go run a pan India campaign, right?
Hmm.
That is the most common thing, most laziest thing being done out there today, because the agencies are feeding that thought in your brain. Go and run a pan India campaign, you'll crack it, your business will go upwards, this, that. And the beauty is this: the business does go upwards, right?
Sure, but
But your earning is zero, right?
hmm.
Which fundamentally means that being an online business, you learned zero by running a TV campaign. So if you did something wrong, you will still not know what you did wrong.
That's where the wastage comes in, right? People can afford to waste a certain amount of money while they're doing this aggressive growth chase. And that's where
Absolutely.
what you're saying is, in effect, a more methodical way of doing it, but people don't have the patience for that kind of methodical
Exactly.
experimentation. So they need to speed through growth. And that would
So
mean that even if 50% of my money is getting wasted, I'm okay to still grow aggressively without
yes.
tracking.
And so here is the thing, right? And it is not necessarily always a founder's fault, right? Like,
I'm not saying it's
uh,
fault. It's a mix of bunch of things, right?
yeah, if you think about if you think about investors, right? If you're going to put like $100 million in a company, value it at $1 billion, whatever, like maybe put
Sure.
$500 million and value it
Hmm.
at some ridiculous value, right? You did not give enough time for the category to get built.
You
You
want to
did not.
accelerate that as well, right?
You are accelerating. The challenge is that to accelerate that, right, you need to have the patience to build those funnels.
So you're saying, in
Currently
terms of
in
spend
education tech,
allocation, hmm.
FYI,
Yeah.
education tech, right?
Hmm.
There are campaigns being run where the cost of acquisition of one paying customer is $1,000. The break even periods on such campaigns is upwards of few years now.
Because everybody wants to build bottom of the funnel campaigns. Nobody's building the top and the middle. Is that what
No,
your
I'm
point
saying
being?
they might be doing
Top and
everything. They
middle
might be
takes
doing
time. They
top,
can't be done
bottom,
overnight,
middle.
right?
The
No, I'm saying
challenge
top and
is
the
that
middle don't happen overnight. That takes time.
exactly those are small, several hundreds of experiments to be run to fine tune, understand what converts, what message converts, what call to action to put over here, what messaging to use over here, and so on and so forth, right? What additional element to add, and so on and so forth. You've just skipped everything. So what is happening today is this: people are sitting on telecalling, selling a online product, which
Yeah,
is
and they're
what
also doing it offline ads, right? And then are setting up.
you
Yeah, okay, get that. So, for I were to translate this into a very simplified conclusion, this is a journey of patience. If you're trying to create a category, you will have to invest in that category creation, which would involve a certain degree of top and middle of the funnel, which is where the storytelling and the part you said about understanding the customer's pain points and making them resonate with it to kind of think about you a little better. Because the original stance was, 20 years ago, you would have an ad on TV and you'll have it product on the shelf, and the journey would be straightforward. People will ask for it, shopkeeper will have it, it's done. But now there is a lot of, let's say, mixing of messages as well. The consumer is bombarded with probably a few thousand brand messages in a day. So from that sense, that to find a place in his mind and then to get him to think about you seriously and then convert and actually make a transaction is a journey. You can only accelerate it so far. You cannot accelerate it beyond a certain level, and that's where the wastage needs to be. You need to draw a line as to how patient can you be about this vis-a-vis where are you okay to waste a certain number. So if you say that from a business model perspective, I'm burning $1,000 on a, I'm spending $1,000 on a customer acquisition. What I mean, I just don't get what's the viable justification or explanation of it. Firstly, are they tracking this metric in direct terms? Because a smaller company also, right, a D2C brand which spending on acquisition today, and let's say they're spending on a customer acquisition or for a food product, which is a 500 rupee unit, and in effect, their net margin from this would probably be 20%, so about 100 odd rupees. If they're spending 600 bucks on customer acquisition, which is still conservative, they would need at least six transactions to break even in this, and
Yeah.
that's not likely to happen because that's not the nature of the category. You get six
So there are
transactions
two
will take
ways
you a
to
long
think
time.
about this, right, Ankur?
Hmm.
There are categories which get funded by super deep pocket investors, right?
Hmm.
Who are okay to sustain for a very long time, right?
Hmm.
And that's where you see companies like Flipkart getting acquired by Walmart.
Sure.
You see companies like Zomato going IPO and Paytm going IPO and so on and so forth, right? So they have very strong engagement metrics. They have very strong repeat usage and so on and so forth, right? uh, so it is okay for some of the investors to bleed the money early on because they know that they are going to own the category and they'll become the one or two last standing warriors, which is absolutely fine, right?
But that's
But
what 0.5 or 0.1% of all the startups that will be born.
even smaller, point
Yeah,
0.1.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
But what
even
that ends is
smaller,
the kind
maybe
of
even smaller
temptations
than
and
point 0.1.
distortions for all the smaller folks, right? I mean, that's distorting the mindset for everybody else in the equation who could have
Absolutely,
built perfectly healthy businesses if they kept their funnels in
100%.
mind. That's a challenge, right? And
Completely
the
agree.
word we've heard often is indigestion being a bigger problem than starvation because too much capital means too much burn. Too much burn means too many darts being thrown all in parallel, and then you're like at the end of a couple of quarters left with nothing because you didn't spend time learning. If you spend
Yep.
that kind of time learning, you would have kept all that money in your bank and known what works and then scale
Yeah.
that up.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Also
Okay,
the
so
thing
this
is
is
this, right?
hmm,
Like one of the learnings very early on that we had, right, was we like we were not very like we were cash flow positive, we were profitable,
sure.
right,
That's the thing with the
within a
gaming
very.
industry, right? You just, I mean, the house always wins.
So my point being that we still went ahead and raised capital from an institutional investor, right? The reason why we raised capital was not to burn that capital, but actually to use that as a war chest in case someone shows up and tries to fight,
Hmm.
right? So It
Sure,
is very
there's nothing wrong
important.
with capital or raising capital. It's just a question of deploying it
Absolutely.
with a
And
degree of
that's exactly what
sensibility.
I'm saying. You need to identify what kind of business you are in, what
Hmm.
kind of industry you are in. Are you in B2B or B2C? Are you in a business which requires like massive amounts of capital, or you are in a business which has a longer conversion cycle and hence you don't require that much of capital? The only capital that you require is to be able to accelerate your product and engineering plus hiring and so on and so forth, and get into more effective methods of marketing and so on and so forth, right? So all this sort of depends, right? Like each thing
Of
depends
course, it's
on
a
where
complex
you are.
equation. But now that you're an angel investor, you would be getting a bunch of pitches from a whole lot of startups of different spaces and shapes and sizes. And is this a message you're able to put across clearly enough that, guys, I'm going to care about the fact that how experimental and data driven are you about your decisions? Because if you're not, you are going to screw it up down the road. How much ever money you have, it's only a matter of runway, right? Instead of 6, you will have 9 months of runway, but you'll burn all of it if you're not data driven about this. And
uh
beyond the vanity side of quoting the data, right?
yeah, no, I think I mean, to be honest, like angel investments are genuinely hard, right? Like it might just look like like you just have to
A
write the check.
lottery.
Super easy, like give a check, what's the big deal? uh no, I think it is genuinely deeply hard and troublesome also, right? Like you believed in an entrepreneur, you believed in a idea, and then that company reaches a big number and then shuts down, right?
Yep.
And that
Before you got
is,
your exit. But
yeah,
that's if it
for
reached a big
exit.
number to begin with, right? The funnel from
So
angel to series is also not exactly a particularly healthy ratio.
very hard, and that's the problem, right? Like it's not like people are not measuring the metrics, right? Like some
Hmm.
people, like some of the entrepreneurs that I was working with in past who were they were doing like fairly large volumes and everything,
Sure.
right? And they did data driven pivots in their business to expand
Hmm.
profitability also,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So I've seen people do all of that, right? But there are sometimes factors which are beyond data,
Sure.
which are beyond metrics and so on and so forth. For example, timing of your business in the market.
So I would not necessarily say that this is the guarantee to success. All right. So you being data driven will still expose you to a certain level of risk which you don't necessarily
Absolutely.
have control over. But
Absolutely.
to and this is necessary but not sufficient. That's what you would say, right? Can somebody
Yeah.
still get away without this? I mean, at some
Yeah.
point the luck will kind of come back calling, right? That
Yeah.
it got you so far, but if you've not
Yeah.
developed that DNA of being experimental about your spends and your approaches, it's going to come back to bite sooner or
Yeah.
later. And I
Yeah.
mean, that's where I would imagine the world would move towards, right? Some
Yeah.
people
I
have
mean,
been able to get away with it, but that's an exception, not the norm.
yeah. So what I've seen, in entrepreneurs these days is this, right? So some are like repeat entrepreneurs or serial entrepreneurs, right? Like
Sure.
they're seasoned, they understand all this, right?
Yep. And
And
they would
there
be
are
very
the,
methodical about this.
yeah, the first time entrepreneurs, right? What I've seen is that they've been very smart with finding ways of sort of growth hacking, let's call it, or like hustle, or staying close to the customer to find out ways of how to
Hmm.
reduce the acquisition cost and still
Hmm.
being able to scale, right?
Hmm.
um, and 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 I think people who are constantly thinking about that, right? Like how
Hmm.
do I genuinely crack this problem, right?
Hmm.
Without giving too much of Google tax or Facebook tax, right? How do I
That's a nice
genuinely
name to it. Hmm.
uh, I think one very recent trend, that not recent, like few couple of years now, the world is becoming communal, right? Like people are forming communities around everything, right? And what happens is that communities are driven by war cries, right? Like someone will come and say, "Oh, let's do this," and everybody is like, "Let's do this." But if you think about it, this is exactly what community driven approach is, that you engage the community. If everybody shares the common pain point, then you will see large collective action,
Hmm. Yep.
right? Which sort of reduces your CAC, because otherwise you will have to build your pricing in such a way that you can accommodate the Google and Facebook tax.
Yeah, which ultimately is not helpful because you're reducing your market size by doing that.
Not
Increasing
market
prices
size,
will
but
reduce market size, though. Yeah,
I mean,
okay,
I
I
would
get
say
it.
market
It's
size,
nuanced.
but more like your margins, right? Like you are
No, I'm saying if you
definitely.
increase your prices, you're reducing your TAM in some
Oh
sense if it's an
yes,
elastic market.
yes. You're right, and not that I'm against it, because
Sure.
I'm always for
No, they're
increasing.
perfectly. I mean, so Louis Vuitton is a good company to emulate if you can, right?
Yeah,
So,
but you're right. Like if you are thinking about building an extremely large business, which is a consumer business, right? Like a extremely large consumer business, you have to think differently about it. Like you cannot just continue to think about the same things over and over again. All those are important, by the way. I'm not discounting the impact of all these channels. Very important, but you also have to, constantly experiment with other things. Even in performance marketing, I can tell you there are today sources available which operate at a lower ecpms than Google and Facebook. And people who are not experimenting, they're constantly working with Google and Facebook and thinking that, this is the know all and do all. And
hmm.
I'm not saying that these other sources are as large as Google and Facebook, but they are significantly supplementing your, Google and
Is
Facebook.
that a portfolio plug for Chingari?
Absolutely not.
It could be, right? I thought that's a pretty well engaged network, and you have a
It
possibility to
is.
advertise to that
So
audience now.
when you look at Chingari's click-through rates, right? Massive. Like you're not going to get those kind of click-through rates anywhere else.
Sure,
What are you
because it's
going to
still
do?
early. It's not still crowded out by ads.
Absolutely not, right?
So, as a marketer, you
And
would want to do that, right? You would want to grab
100%.
the new opportunities before they become mainstream because it's still cheap to do that.
And so this is where the businesses and marketeers get separated out, right?
Hmm.
Where there are marketeers who will follow the set path for them, right? The
Hmm.
set path is, I will continue to hire celebrities. I will continue to hire fake influencers. I'll continue to
Fake,
push
huh?
garbage content in
You
the
have to
market.
follow the fake.
I'll tell you what, right? Like I've interviewed brand managers and I showed them their own creatives, right? And I said, put a hand on your chest and tell me, would you buy this product after seeing this video? They'll say no. They'll say no to their own brand messaging. They'll say no, right? But then I ask them, why do you do it? That is how it has been. Oh, someone told us that we should do this. Oh, this. Oh,
So
this.
that's a complicated equation in terms of how large players operate. At this point, I'm not going to worry slash delve into that. I'm more interested in how do I improve the success rate of startups by just the virtue of this whole growth hacking is a very known concept, and you've used this word also
Yes,
in your conversation.
I'll
But
I'll
the
share a
science of growth
simple.
hacking is science. It's not just spending more money. I mean, you need to be running experimental approaches.
So this is where, so I'll talk about two things, right? And first I'll talk about how Kunal Shah uses his social influence, and he leverages like deep creative insights from people like Tanmay and his teams
Hmm.
to sort of break through the regular communication ruts, right?
Hmm.
So I think if you can leverage genuine creativity, nothing like that, right? So that is one
So that's
approach to.
ultimately a funnel play, right? I mean, it's going to reduce your CAC. It'll show
Yes,
up in that circle. It's
yes,
not brand advertising as long as it's delivering a funnel.
absolutely.
I mean,
So that is
it can.
one way,
So that's
right?
where
Like
maybe 1 minute
creative.
to be spent on. Maybe you can complete your point, and then I want to spend a minute on
Sure,
this brand versus performance top funnel play because
sure.
it gets confused.
So, right. So this is one
Yeah,
part of it, like extreme creativity,
good
right?
creative.
The other part of it is very simple, right?
Hmm.
We know that we buy from people, the people that we trust, right? Now what does that mean fundamentally, right? It fundamentally means building referral programs, building customer advocacy programs. They have the lowest cacs,
But has there been
fastest.
a playbook on scaling these? I mean, I've not seen too many very successful. I mean, I've seen a Dropbox kind of play, but which example are you talking about which is built on referrals well
uh,
enough?
no, so Ankur, it's never something like this that it is built only on referrals. I'll give
Sure,
you an
of course, but a
example.
substantial
Early
contribution.
stages, right? for
Mhm.
for of my own business, right? I gamified a friend referral system somewhere in 2009-10, right?
यार वक्त तो
Immediately,
address book import चलता था. That used to be a great growth hack, right?
400% jump in paid conversions.
हाँ.
Now I'll talk about FanVideo, right?
Hmm.
I basically applied a very simple approach. I said, okay, who is my TG? Who is going to buy? There are brand marketeers, customer success manager,
Hmm.
communication people, performance marketeers who want to build meaningful content, customer driven content, right?
Hmm.
Let me interview them.
Hmm.
Ask them, what do they think about video content? What do
Sure.
they think about, customer advocacy? What do they think about testimonial as a concept, right? You'll be surprised. Within a 2-month period, we have now like a content
Great pipeline.
powerhouse of 50 CMOs, CEOs, founders, marketeers sharing from their own mouths that this is the most powerful method of communication, right?
And yet incorporating that turns out to be slightly slow because there are
It
systems and
does.
teams and organizations to be building.
But think about
But
it from a
nonetheless, it's still valuable, right? It's still valuable.
absolutely.
It
If you
creates an
think
amazing
about
top
it
of the
from a
funnel.
standpoint, if I was to go through a regular B2B route, like
Yep.
tap to like multiple people in the company, now what is happening is this. If let's say Ankur Gattani is saying that this kind of content definitely works, right?
Hmm.
So you have a certain say in
Sure.
your team at least will listen to you. Whether they buy or
Yep.
not is a completely product
Sure.
solutioning problem,
Hmm.
right? Which is fine, or it could be a pricing problem or anything, right? But at least I've got their attention, which otherwise would have taken me a
Yep.
lot
A
of
lot longer.
sales effort, right?
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
I'm just saying, all right, let's figure out these kind of hacks, right? Just
Got it.
either purely creative communication hacks or these kind of like
Practical hacks.
network kind of hacks that you
Sure.
can.
So, the part that I wanted to bring up and get your point on, and you did touch upon this earlier, probably before the session started, around the top of the funnel, brand advertising versus performance metrics around that, right? So, at this point, people engage influencers and get them to produce content on their channels. And I'm hearing now that, affiliate links are being used with influencers as well, and they'll get compensated only for the funnel of transactions they create. But that's a
Yeah,
very weird approach because you're trying to use a tofu channel as a bofu outcome.
yeah,
I don't know how you look at this. So, what's your, let's say, assessment of a brand's journey on tofu, mofu, bofu? How does the spend allocation evolve? How should a company owner, founder think about these things? That okay, I'm going to do
sure,
this for this purpose, this for this purpose, and this for this purpose.
sure. So I think it is first of all important to understand this whole influencer thing, right? My sense is this, that there are influencers who are influencers because of the content creation that they are doing, right? Now there are people who are creating genuinely meaningful content, which is not just pure entertainment but also helpful, right? Now for those people I call them content creators, right? And those kind of people you can engage to sort of spread the message in a very focused way. For example, there is a B2B let's say influencer who's genuinely creating helpful content saying that, okay, if you are in user experience domain, here are the top 3 tools that can solve this for you, right? So on and so forth, right? So what I'm proposing here is this, right? That you need to identify the right kind of people, co-create content with them because they are genuinely creating valuable content. Then there are influencers who have whatever follower base, primarily because I don't know, they're showing some part of their body is or just dancing out there for no reason, like on some whatever popular song. Sure, I'm sure there are some brands that might find value in that, but I don't see that, right? And hence you need to understand this. Is this person going to be a genuine, authentic, sort of like a
Brand
content
ambassador.
creator for you?
So in some sense, I mean, I'm not sure the word brand ambassador fits very well, but it's been, I mean, a little loosely applied to many. So anyway, I don't want to deep into influencer side. What I want to bring out from that part was, in effect, it might just be a tofu affair where you're talking about reach and frequency as a metric to measure tofu efforts. And on the other side, people want to put now affiliate style links to measure conversion, and then
Yeah,
it just gets mixed up. So as a marketer, I'm like wondering as to why am I doing this? What are my metrics from this exercise? Is conversion the right metric? And influencers is
Yeah.
one of them. There is a lot
Yeah.
of other things we do as marketers, and that's
Sure.
where the whole allocation of spends as well as the expectation and outcomes, that this is tofu, this is going to give me reach and recall or whatever in my TG, whatever the ICP I've identified. This is MoFu, this will build trust and credibility with my testimonial videos, with my logos of customers, or maybe just names of some valuable customers that I have, or some stories from there. And this is MoFu, this is supposed to drive conversions. And at
Sure.
this point, that marketing mix is all over the place, right? You don't necessarily understand how you're allocating time, effort, bandwidth, and even money towards these three things differently. Maybe in the initial
Yeah.
period, you only want to do both. But if that's your
Yeah.
objective, then probably don't do the stuff which is not giving you a perfectly healthy conversion funnel. Because
Yeah.
anytime I put a video out with, let's say, an influencer, it's not going to give me the simple conversion funnel of a search campaign. It's not going to work. So should I do this right now? Maybe I should wait a little bit. Because what tends to happen sometimes is people start to see these things as magic pills. I'll have somebody write about me. She's great, and I'm going to get a spike. It's not going to happen because the conversion funnel is poor. That's the
Yeah.
reality of it. So I'm
Yeah.
just trying to kind of demystify this bit in terms of a startup's journey in the initial period. Maybe
Yeah.
you just take care of the BOFU side, which is the high intent Google keywords play, where you have a certain volume. At some point, you'll saturate there because there's only so much volume available. Is where
Yeah.
you start to now create your MoFu and then you create your TOFU. And but then those things are supposed to improve your downstream efforts, not necessarily drive conversion directly. People will have their mixed journeys, but it will
Yeah.
not be like somebody saw an influencer ad and straight away came and bought. Probably small percentage, but not
Yeah.
like the healthiest conversion funnel. So,
Yeah.
how do you allocate time, bandwidth, mind space, money to these things as you evolve?
Yeah.
Or
So,
what's a logical way of doing this?
yeah, I mean, again, I'll take a step back and say that,
Hmm.
you'll have to sort of think, what stage of business are you in, right?
Hmm.
If, let's say, that your objective is, even if at an early stage, right, you have zero funnel, right? All you have is a sign up form, and all you do want to do is collect email IDs of people or some
Hmm.
interest of
Hmm.
people, right? Point is that, if you've been able to identify certain people whom you think have the right kind of follower base, who are potential customers for you, right? Then you should think about using their time to sort of uh, get your word out, purely from bofu standpoint, right?
Hmm.
Sorry, from tofu standpoint.
Hmm.
Standpoint. But if you are saying that, listen, there are people out there whom I feel are perfect fit for my product, and my product is ready to be, funneled from an influencer video, or from a similar kind of content creators video. Why not run an experiment? And my point here is simple, right? You might find some playbooks in the market which might be able to guide you, but the best way is this, right? Like, experiment, allocate small
And
budget.
whether you get a team or you get an agency, that's something as a founder you have to watch day in and day out the results of all your experiments and
there
the
are there are
learning that
platforms
come out of it.
now, which sort of simplifies this.
So is it also a technology and system problem, or is it more of an attitude problem? Because you pointed to the attitude side of things earlier, that people don't have the patience to run through this. But are there now solutions available that you think are good enough from that perspective that will show you the outcomes of experiments and the attribution model is effective and what to do?
Yeah. So, I mean, I know of 2 3 companies. One of them who are solving the logistics problems. One of them is solving logistics plus performance problem. But as of now, performance in their mind is engagement rate and, like, whatever basic
Hmm.
metrics. Nobody is looking at performance from a standpoint of conversions or transactions. Those
The
metrics
full
are left.
funnel, right? That's the part that
Yeah, there
needs
is
to be
one
understood
company
better.
that I heard was putting a pixel, because the guy comes from performance background. So
Hmm.
I think out of his own personal interest, he's putting a pixel, but I don't think he's charging people based on performance metric. Also, I feel that, a lot of influencers uh, sort of have reached a status who are meaningful, meaning who
Hmm.
have fairly large follower base, because of the celebrity behavior in past, where celebrities charge some ridiculous amounts and marketeers give those amounts to them. um, these people have reached a point where they feel that, oh, you can't question me
Attention.
on pricing or performance, right? and
Hmm.
and sure, like, I mean, then people like me show up and who say, okay, good
Yeah, who
luck.
will always question ROI?
Yeah. So, I mean,
But it's fair
in
to
a
ask for
11 year
ROI
journey.
now, right? I mean, from
Sorry?
all of this also, from a funnel perspective, since you've done
Yeah,
that TV advertising and measured the outcomes and impact on your business, it
yeah,
might need more sophisticated approaches, which are a function of the maturity of your org. But
yeah.
it's perfectly legit to question ROI from everything. Some of it might just be the reach and impressions and
See,
frequency, which is top of the
I
funnel.
ask a very simple question, Ankur. Like, if you're
Mhm.
not going to ask ROI, right, then why don't spend all your budget on that channel? Spend everything on that channel. No, it is the best channel. Spend everything over
So
there.
saying the beliefs and the convictions are sort of misleading. That
Exactly. Because
you're
see,
basically getting tempted by some vanity metric, but not really being
conviction will come
data
through
driven about
data.
this.
Conviction
Hmm.
will come through data and
That's the
measurability.
that's the perfect words from a performance marketer, right? That's the performance puzzle getting solved. Data solves everything. Everything else is hogwash. So,
Perfect.
one last question before we sign off, given that we're spilling over in time, and I would probably want to do a second edition delving deeper on this subject. But when performance conversations happen, and I ask for full funnel information, there is a degree of artificial intelligence that the platforms are now incorporated, which make my patience levels a little uncertain. That how much time do I wait before I can start expecting some degree of outcomes? How do you
Sure.
decide how much time is good enough time?
So, what I've seen is in some of the past experiments, most of the AI maturity comes through companies deploying ML very well,
Mhm.
right? And ML models, depending on the complexity of the problem and the data size that you are capturing in terms of number of data points,
Hmm.
ML models can take anywhere, from few days to
Oh,
few
I'm not
weeks.
even trying to build my own. I'm talking about Google and Facebook's ML models. When I'm spending my
Oh,
money, how soon do I start to see that is this
oh,
a good idea or not?
oh, yeah, yeah,
Building an
yeah.
ML model is a full separate conversation, Sachin. We'll have to do that another time.
Sure. So, see, Facebook has a very clear structure around this. They say drive whatever objective that you've set. The moment we hit 50 such events within a 7 day period, I'll be able to tell whether I can run this campaign or not. So, their
Hmm.
models are able to take 50 events to answer this question. When you look at Google, on the other hand, the uncertainty is high. I've seen that, even with 100, 200, 250 events, they are not able to immediately respond and give you an answer. But purely from a statistical standpoint, I would say 250 events in general, or maybe 200 events in general, is a fairly
And just
decent.
to talk about when you say event, it's probably a conversion event at the funnel
Anything.
level. So
It
that
could be
campaign,
anything. It
whatever
could be
event is happening.
a click.
So
It could
that's
be.
where no. So I'm just trying to understand. So when you say event, you're talking about the event that you're trying to optimize for, right?
Yes. Yes.
So as long as 250 of them happen, Google would know, which means the
Yeah.
question for me to ask my performance marketer, whether it's in-house or agency, is that okay, it's okay to take a week or two if you have to get that there. I can't get impatient tomorrow morning that I've given you that much money. Now
Correct.
what's the ROI? So I have to give it that kind of time. And that's
Yes.
where how much time is good enough time I was trying to understand. And what you're
Yes.
saying is, in effect, a certain quantum of that metric that you're trying to optimize is the right approach, not the calendar time. कि 7 दिन निकले या
Yes.
15 दिन. As long as you got your 200 conversion events of the path that you're trying to optimize, Google would now become more intelligent about this.
So, okay, let me qualify this.
Huh.
This is not in isolation. It all
Of course,
so number of events are also tied to the number of days, right?
of
For
course.
example, if you were to run a A/B test and you ran it
Hmm.
only for 7 days, got 50 events.
Hmm.
No, A/B test
Hmm.
is very different world, right? Like
Sure.
there you need to control for several other external
Yep.
factors.
Of course. Hmm.
I'm purely talking about Facebook ad or Google ad,
Got
where
it.
their systems are built in such a way that
Yeah.
Facebook would
Yeah.
take 7 days and 50 events, and Google would take like maybe 2 weeks and
Hmm. Yeah, but that's the patient part as well, right? Most people don't want to wait for that outcome to see that experimental result and then further deploy. But well,
sure.
given that, I would love to continue this conversation, but we've spilled over substantially already. Says a lot
I am
about the amount of
sorry for this.
insights we've got. No, it's entirely on me to have just remained curious about so many things, right? So it's been awesome, Sachin. Thank you so much for doing this. I think it personally demystifies a bunch of topics for me. I'm sure it'd be
Sure.
helpful for a bunch of startups that should reconsider how really data-driven they're being versus driven by vanity stuff like getting us pretty a face to do something for them or whatever. But anyhow, I think we hope to contribute meaningfully to building more sustainable and sensibly done businesses and
Sure.
truly do growth hacking jobs. Thank you so
Perfect.
much, Sachin.
Good.
Fabulous having you here.
Thank you so much, Ankur, for having me as part of this. I had a great time. Thank you.
Thank you.